Boker Tov, everybody, and welcome to our Taste of Torah. This week, we are going to be discussing the Torah portion, Vayeira, which is the second portion in the book of Exodus. It comes in the midst of our most important story, and it is a great action sequence. We are confronting Pharaoh, and Moses has come, having been commissioned to address Pharaoh when he objects that he can't speak, that he is heavy of tongue, as it says literally in Hebrew. We don't know if Moses was, in fact, suffering from some kind of speaking disability, or whether he was simply, someone from Alabama or something that he felt like he couldn't present himself effectively. We don't know. But in any case, God does this remarkable thing. He says, I'm going to give you Aaron, and I am going to make you God to Pharaoh, and Aaron is going to be your prophet. And so what it does is it sets up a kind of symmetry in the confrontation. Pharaoh is a living God, and he is surrounded by advisors, including prophets, who will defend his interests. Moses, a refugee, really a fugitive from justice, has returned, and he now will stand as a designated hitter God, and Aaron will be his prophet. And so there is a kind of symmetry set up here. But before we get to that, I want to introduce my guest today, and that is, this is my staff. When I cosplay Moses with the kids, this is the staff I use. And we don't know what a shepherd staff would have looked like in the Iron Age. Just would have been a stick of appropriate proportions for whacking jackals and poking sheep and things like that. But in any case, I use this because really indications are that Moses' staff was not an ordinary staff. It may not have even been a shepherd staff. Many people used staves back in those days. There were few roads, ground was uneven. It was really helpful to have a staff to help you get over that ground. And of course, as you're getting up there in the years, it helps your stability. And Moses, at this point, we need to remember, is 80 years old when he starts this confrontation. He's older than President Trump or Joe Biden, not quite as old as Nancy Pelosi. All right. So anyway, about this staff was given to me. People give me stuff, which is the coolest thing ever, right? I just keep getting these cool gifts, which I, hoard here in my office. And this one has a wonderful carved head on it. Now, I don't know if that's a springbok or a gazelle or an ibex. I always say it's an ibex simply because ibex are, in fact, native to the land of Israel. So why shouldn't Moses' staff have been an ibex staff? And what I want to just tell you about for a few minutes is the wonderful folkloric traditions in Judaism about this staff. This is no ordinary staff. In fact, in Exodus 17, it is in fact called the staff of God, suggesting it's just not any old stick you picked up. So the rabbis run with that, and they create what is called a chain midrash. Every time a staff is mentioned somewhere in the Torah, it is understood to be the same staff, the staff that Moses uses. So it starts out with Adam, and it makes its way through the patriarchs to Jacob, and Jacob passes it on to Joseph. Joseph has it, and when he dies, it is not inherited by his brothers, but Pharaoh takes it, according to this tradition, because Pharaoh knows it's a really awesome staff. And then he puts it in his treasury. And according to the tradition, it's not that Moses, who theoretically could have claimed it as an Egyptian minor prince in the house of Egypt, it is in fact claimed by Moses's father-in-law, Jethro. Jethro, apparently, according to the Midrash, does some favor for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, oh, you can take one object from my treasury, anything you want as a payment for what you've done for me. And Aaron, being a discerning fellow, walks in there, sees this strange staff, and says, that's special, I want that. And everything's going great. Jethro walks home with his staff, and he goes back to Midian, and there he is, and he's walking into his home, and as he sets the point down for a moment in the middle of the courtyard of his hacienda, we don't know, but someplace, right? Whoosh, the staff pins itself to the ground. It plunges into the ground, and it just stays there, and no one can get it out. All right, so there it stays for years and years and years, until one day, Zipporah, the daughter of the Midian priest, brings home this wandering Hebrew, who we know as Moses, who rescued her and saved her from some other bully shepherds. And as Moses is walking in, he casually looks at this strange object, and without giving it a second thought, pulls it out of the ground. And in that instant, Jethro knows that Moses is a man of destiny. And so he gives his daughter to this man of destiny as a wife, and Moses now has the possession of the staff that the patriarchs carried before him. If that sounds familiar, it is, of course. It clearly has analogous to the story of Arthur and Excalibur. Now, we can find, I've seen absolutely no evidence that connects these two stories one way or another. This story was written somewhere in the Mediterranean in the 11th century. The legends of King Arthur and the Arthurian cycle was not anywhere near being complete at that time. Maybe one influenced the other, but we can't prove it. But in any case, the staff of Moses is the Excalibur of the Jewish people. And it goes on in a later Midrash to even pass down to no less than the mother of the Messiah, who is not, as it turns out, the Virgin Mary. It's a woman named Hecuba. And Hecuba, the mother of Moses, uses the staff of Moses, not the mother of the Messiah, uses the staff of Moses to defend Jerusalem until such time as her son can arrive and bring about the Messianic era. So it is heroically used by a woman. It's like a lightsaber in the hands of Rey, used to defend the Jewish people at the very end of time. So it's a great legend, but that's not what we're going to be talking about. What I really want to talk to you about is the question of free will, because nowhere else in the Torah is the issue of free will brought up in such a way as to make us doubt. But most of you are familiar with the famous theme that as the struggle progresses and Moses has to bring more and more plagues to free the Egyptians, or to free the Israelites, Pharaoh, we are told, has his heart hardened by God. Now that completely defies everything we've been taught about Torah and Judaism and the idea that we are free to choose. Why would God do that? That seems wrong. That seems to be a fundamental contradiction of Jewish values and the lessons of the Torah. So the person who tries to tackle this in the most sophisticated way is, not surprisingly, our great medieval philosopher, legalist, astronomer, physician, multitasking, polymath, Moses Maimonides. Moses Maimonides writes a treatise on a Talmudic tractate called Pirkei Avot, and his commentary is called Shmoneh Pirkim, which is the 8 chapters, which is what makes up the Pirkei Avot. And really, it's an extended commentary on ethics and human nature. And in chapter 8, he tackles this issue head on, because he talks about the importance of free will to Judaism and to Torah. And he explains that there are really no impinging forces that prevent us from doing exactly what we want to do. And in making that claim, he has to confront this question. So this is how he deals with it. He says, look, in the first 5 plagues, God does nothing to Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh has the complete freedom to do what he will. And then suddenly in the 6th plague, God declares, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart in order to make a demonstration here. Why? Why not allow Pharaoh to sink himself? Well, according to Maimonides, this is not really about denying Pharaoh free will, but it's actually punishment for an earlier act of free will. According to Maimonides, Pharaoh already has so abused his free will that God is going to try and punish him. So the issue that Maimonides raises is that Pharaoh, of his own free will, without any prompting from anything or anybody, decides to enslave the Israelite people in chapter 1 and chapter 2. He does this by telling a lie and a series of lies to the Egyptian people, telling them that these Israelites are a threat. We've made no evidence of being a threat, and that we need to deal cunningly with them and enslave them. And so we are gradually enslaved. We are placed under harsh taskmasters. This is Pharaoh's free will sin. And it's so egregious, according to Maimonides, that God decides that in order to fully punish Pharaoh, he's going to deny him his free will at a later occasion, right? A punishment to be determined, as it were. So he does. He denies Pharaoh his free will. And of course, what happens is the death of the firstborn. And then, according to Maimonides, God releases Pharaoh. And now Pharaoh has the opportunity to look back upon all of the decisions he made up to this point, and then decide how he's going to go forward. And as we know, he decides that he actually regrets the decision to release the Israelites, and he pursues them with his army. So then God is forced to destroy the Egyptian army at the sea and allow the Israelites to escape. So part of the object lesson, according to Maimonides, is to teach us that free will is actually incredibly important, because in the end, God is not going to prevent us from doing the worst or the best we can do. In the case of Pharaoh, he has plenty of opportunity to learn from his earlier decisions, but chooses to follow through. If God had not hardened his heart, there's no reason to think he wouldn't have just done everything else that the Torah reports. He would have just continued to do what he had been doing. So God wants us to understand that there's no point in him intervening in our acts of free will to make us be good or to prevent us from becoming bad. Every one of us has the capacity, by our own choices, to be as great as Moses or as wicked as Pharaoh. That's the point of the story. So Maimonides presents this case to us, whether you accept that as a genuine demonstration or not. Maimonides understands that God elevates this moment or these moments of free will to help us fully understand that nothing can prevent us from being terrible people or great people. It's really up to us. I'm going to end here, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Everybody have a wonderful week.